What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Welcome back to Truth Be Told, where we believe an experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and I'm here with world-renowned psychic Eddie Connor, and today's guest co-host and 8-time Emmy-winning investigative reporter, Anna Garcia.
Hi, Tony. We thank you for supporting our sponsors. For over 40 years, Earth-Friendly Products have brought you the greenest home products for all your family needs. Go to ecos.com.
And take your mind on a literary journey by traveling over to adventuresunlimitedpress.com and purchase books from many of our famed experts featured right here.
And for the last 25 years, I've been looking back in history searching my family legacies. Why? Because it's possible that any of us could have a historical connection that could have ended up in the history books.
I'll say, Tony looked into some of my family's history and opened some mysterious sort of doors and windows that kind of shocked the snot out of me, really. But then again, isn't that what history is all about, like learning new things? Tonight, we're diving into the world of genealogy with former ghost hunter Kris Williams.
Kris is a former genealogy contributor to Ancestry.com, a former historical researcher and investigator for the sci-fi channel show Ghost Hunters. She's also a former co-lead investigator of Ghost Hunters International. I'm excited to see how each of us can pursue our family trees and discover more about our ancestors.
And so am I, Anna. Please welcome genealogist and ghost hunter Kris Williams.
Kris, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We are so great, and we're so glad you're back for number 2 with us right here on Truth Be Told.
I'm so excited.
Yes, last time we really focused majority on the ghost side of when you work with ghost hunters and your travels, but that was actually what we're going to be talking about today is really how you got started working with ghost hunters, because you're a researcher of history, or especially of family trees and genealogical stuff. So let's get started so everybody really knows your background again, how you got started with working of just the history of family.
Okay. Well, when I was 11, I was in the 4th grade, and my teacher at the time had just gotten into genealogy herself, and she became hooked. So she came into our class, and she decided she would give us this 2-week assignment for us to go home and put together a family tree. And at that time, I already liked history. My dad's a history person. It kind of rubbed off on me a bit. So I went home and I talked to my grandparents and my parents, and I just became hooked. I know there was one story about somebody on my grandmother's side that was hanged on Boston Common in 1660. She was accused of being a witch because she was a Quaker, and there's a statue of her in front of the State House in Boston.
Wow.
So when I was hearing these stories, as a kid, it just completely blew my mind, and then it became this obsession to try to figure out how we were connected to her.
And so, how did your knowledge of the years of working in this field get the attention of ghost hunters?
Well, I'd already been friends with Jason and Grant for about, say 3 or 4 years before the show came about.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew that I was into genealogy and that I'd been at it for a long time. And I think it was halfway through 3rd season, Donna had left, and they wanted to bring another female into the team because there's just way too many guys. And
I know the feeling. I really know the feeling.
So they like keeping people or bringing people in that they know really well. And they knew my research background. They were looking for somebody to research locations and the people who were supposedly haunting them. And they felt that my genealogy background would help researching the locations, but also the people that passed in those locations. So a lot of times I would start looking into the history of the home. I'd find the names of previous owners, and then I would kind of do a bit of, I'd pull in my genealogy experience to research that person to try to figure out how did they die, where did they die, you know, did anything else happen in the house that was kind of crazy that might have caused activity to kick off from it, or hang around for whatever reason. But it was an easy transition. It's a lot of the same steps from researching the property to researching people, and it was just something that I enjoyed doing. So it felt that I'd be a good fit.
Okay, and then you were a former Ancestry.com, and we'll get into more of that. But what is a contributor? What did you do for Ancestry.com?
Well, I started using Ancestry.com, I think, in my 20s, and I was a member of the site for quite a while. I enjoyed how many records I was able to get on it without having to go for it,
right.
Which I did before computers were so accessible. So I used them for several years, and then after Ghost Hunters International, I reached out to Ancestry, and we started talking back and forth about how long I'd been into it and my interest in it and my love for it. And they liked that I was in my early 30s and I was into this, because most people, when you think genealogy, you think like 65-plus-year-old
right.
grandma, white hair, like, you know, running around a graveyard or sitting at the computer for hours on end. And I wasn't that. So it was, for them, they just felt that I might be able to connect with the younger audience, to get them to see that genealogy is fascinating, and it's fun, and it's shocking, and surprising, and it's addictive. So what I did was I would contribute 4 blogs a month. 2 of them would be written, 2 of them would be video, and they kind of gave me free range with it. I could pretty much write about any topic I wanted. It was either genealogy related or, you know, historical events, historical locations, anything I felt like writing about, and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Well, I have to say that, you know, for the people listening on live or on podcast, this is not really they're advertising with us, Ancestry.com. It's just a place where people can go to get to the heart of their family tree. And so let's begin with that, because I've been working my family tree. I started in the late 80s, so probably about 25 years or a little more than 25 years, because I was young and I just found it fascinating. I found fascinating where my family came from. You know, my mother's side, they were from Bohemia. We didn't know much about it. And my father's side, I knew they were from Kentucky, and supposedly we were related to Hatfields and McCoys and Davy Crockett and all this stuff. But, you know, nobody really knew how. They just said, well, that's what my grandpa used to tell me. And so, and that's where it all started. And so I want to get started to encourage people on here today of how to get started. What would you suggest the first thing to do, not necessarily even with Ancestry.com, but just starting to do the research of their family?
Okay. I think the biggest mistake people do make is they jump straight to the computer. And they think about the whole tree and getting so many generations back, and the whole process becomes really overwhelming when you do that. So usually what I say is, you know, you are the base of your tree, so you start with you. And then from there, you start with your immediate family. So you're starting with the living to eventually kind of dig into those who've passed. And it's good, because if you get a good, solid base of information from those who are around you, it'll make researching or, you know, looking for specific documents that much easier. So usually what I would suggest is that I've got a bunch of different sheets on my website. There's family group sheets, there's pedigree charts, there's all these worksheets that you can use to kind of help you keep the information together. And, you know, let's say if it was starting with me, I'd sit with my parents and you'd ask them some basic questions, you know, where were they born, the date they were born, when they married. Obviously, if they're still alive, I'm not asking them date of death. if I'm lucky enough to have my grandparents, I would then go sit down with them. You know, same thing, date of birth, place of birth, marriage, military service. You just try to get as much basic information from them as possible, and you'll also ask them about the next generation. So if you're sitting with your parents and they're the oldest generation, ask them what they remember about their parents. Do they know their parents' place of birth and death and the date? And you just do that as far as you can go with your living immediate family. And then from there, what I did was I started branching out to distant family. So I'd ask my grandparents, do you still have any of the phone numbers or emails for your brothers and sisters, your siblings? So then I started reaching out to my grandparents' siblings, because the thing is everybody has different memories. You know, take my brother, sister, and I. The three of us can remember different parts of my grandfather who passed. We're all going to have different stories, different things to contribute. I may remember more about his military service. I may have the records where my brother and sister don't. My brother and sister may have photos that I don't have. So you kind of just, network within your own family first. You see what everybody's got. You compare notes, see what everyone remembers. And then once you've got a good, solid base of information, then you can start jumping on sites like Ancestry or FamilySearch.org or Fold3. There's a ton of really great websites out there, and not all of them charge, which is nice.
Right.
But yeah, it start with the living. If you want to get, into the people of past, you got to start with, who's around you right now.
And I think, I'm gonna bring up my tree here in a little bit, but can I use just you as an example, Eddie?
Yeah.
So Eddie, I don't think you knew much about your father's side at all.
Nobody did.
Nobody did.
Yeah,
so
except for his sister.
So did she do any research for her?
No, she sent me a letter later confirming some of the things that you had already asked me about before you got deeper into the family tree.
Right.
Yeah.
So Eddie, like I said, I've done family research for a long time and used Ancestry for a long time, so I know a lot of the ins and outs, and I'm sure you know tons more. But when you have a very common name, that's where the dates become very essential. The places of birth are very essential, because if somebody's like John Smith and you're in Illinois, you pull it up and there's like 500 John Smiths in Illinois in that time period. So it's very important. But when Eddie's case, your father's name was very unique, your grandfather's name was unique, and so on and so on. So, but we went back quite a ways with Eddie's ancestry, and I'm just going to say this, that it blew both of our minds that Eddie is part of the history books. Well, his family is. Yeah. And can you want to share it?
What little bit I know, we're connected to some politics up around Virginia or West Virginia or Virginia, and there was a lot of slave owners, of course, which that did not surprise me with my family child. And then there was a couple of lynches that got into the local politics and into the court system, the judicial system, to try to make things as fair as they possibly could. And then it turns out that they named Lynchburg, Virginia, after
one of your uncles.
Yeah,
he was a judge.
Yeah, he was a big to-do up there, and he was all about fairness and equality. Thank goodness somebody in my family was.
But
they also named lynching after him.
The lynch law.
Oh no, that's horrible.
Isn't that something?
Oh,
that's like
goodness.
Your name is Mud. Oh,
yeah.
Wow. The same problem. That family has the same problem.
Oh yeah, it's all of Lynchburg, Virginia is named after a person who came up with the lynching law.
Yeah.
I mean, why would that? Yeah,
but he came up with the law, and everybody else chose to use that as
true.
As lynching. Yeah. So, but I mean, that's what I find fascinating about history, is good or bad. Look, what I didn't understand recently is, what's his name?
Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. I mean, this is part of your family history. It's not you. It's part of, your blood. What do you think about people that when they find out some of their history and they hide it? because they feel like it's a shame.
Well, they never hide the really cool stuff, like I am Cleopatra's great, 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 great.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is people, it's funny, I think people will get into genealogy because they're looking for, Mayflower passengers, they're looking for presidents and war heroes, they're looking at people who are successful, and you kind of get a high off of that ancestor success.
Yes.
So I think when someone digs up somebody that was kind of on, the not so good side, their first instinct is to just bury it and forget it. But the thing is, it's like, all of us, I mean, you look at it, I have 2 parents, I have 4 grandparents, I have 8 great-grandparents, and it keeps on going and going and going.
16, 32.
For you to sit there and assume that you don't descend from anybody who is nasty,
That's right.
it's impossible. So the thing is, you also have to remember, too, is if you remove that person from your tree, you wouldn't exist at all. So I think they deserve just as much attention as anybody else would. And you just have to kind of realize that I am me, luckily, because of this person and because they existed. That doesn't mean I have to agree how they, handled their lives. But in Affleck's case, he's too big of a celebrity to just go burying stuff like that and thinking, oh yeah, no one's going to figure it out. So I found it kind of silly. I think that if you're going to dig into your family on a very public show like that as well, you have to be ready to embrace anything they come up with, 1. 2, you have to realize, the time period. It doesn't mean that it's okay, but they lived in a specific time period where it was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And you just kind of have to, it just is what it is. You can't change the past. And it in some ways, the past definitely defines you, but it's not, he's not guilty of anything. So
Right.
I was watching the whole thing unfold, and I was like, that was just really silly. He should have just thrown it out there, and that would have been the end of it. But now it's a bigger deal because
That's right.
he tried to bury it. His ancestors get the last laugh on that one.
Right.
Yeah, they sure did.
He's like, you shouldn't have forgot about me. But, yeah, I don't know. It was kind of a crazy thing to do.
Kris, do you find that is it possible that there are certain areas in the United States, certain cities and states within the United States that are easier to follow family records?
Oh, for sure.
What
for sure. I mean, the East Coast, the Northeast especially, it's just the records go back for a lot longer. And then you have people, as soon as they start moving west, they're kind of going into unknown territory, and they may have been in those areas for, a few decades before they started taking accurate record of birth or death or anything. I have one client that I was working with in Tennessee, and after we went by a certain year, there were no death certificates, there were no birth certificates. You had to find other ways of tracing these people. And I was so thrilled when this family started going back to the East Coast. I'm like, yes, we're going to find stuff. Things will get easier. But, yeah, it definitely depends on the time period. It depends on the areas your ancestors live in. And sometimes you just kind of have to get a little creative to be able to find anything. Because other things can happen as well. Like there'd be old courthouse system went up in flames, or floods destroyed records. So, yeah, you don't really know what you're going to deal with until you start digging.
Did you see the movie Philomena?
I didn't.
Oh, child, that's a good movie. You need to put that on your Netflix list, okay? Do you find that a lot of maybe certain religious organizations and or orphanages had a tendency to lose records?
You mean destroy records?
Yes.
Well, wasn't the Quakers? Didn't the Quakers, if you married outside of the Quakers, they would destroy your records?
Well, I know that a lot of the natives' records are destroyed. I mean, the little ones that they did keep, and it was by our own government, which is pretty crappy, especially when you think of many of the natives, they respect their elders, they respect their
Yes.
ancestors, and, it's some of the stories I've heard from people who have native roots, and just the trouble they go through trying to trace their ancestors is just, I can't even wrap my head around it. I've been pretty fortunate to be able to trace my family back pretty far. So So yeah, I don't know how I would deal with. I don't know how I deal with that. I don't think I'd handle it very well, because you learn so much. You learn so much about yourself by looking into your ancestry, which you would figure, oh, whatever, the person died, 100 years ago. What do they have to do with me? But you learn a lot about life. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about, ancestors that eventually influence your parents and your grandparents, and you get a better view and a better look into who they are and how they turned out the way they turned out, or how you turned out the way you turned out. It just gives you so much insight. So when I hear about, records either being destroyed or hidden, it's sad. It's really sad.
Kris, do you find that some of the people who start on this search do it after they've lost a loved one or both their parents, and then at that time they don't have the opportunity to go back and ask them all those questions they wish that they had? Do you find that a lot of people, when those huge life events happen and losses, that's when they want to, all of a sudden, they have that need to figure out where they came from?
I think that's part of it, yeah. And I think also you kind of hit an age where you realize you're not going to live forever, and you've worked your entire life to build yourself up to a certain point. And then you start to question what you're leaving behind yourself. And then it kind of motivates you to look into who else has passed before you, and, who before you has been forgotten. So it becomes a very addictive hobby. It's just taken over my life really a few times. I've kind of had to step back, but yeah, it's hard. I'll meet people who want to get into it, but they're like, I am the oldest generation. I don't know what to do. And usually what I tell them, I'm like, well, you're a very, very important piece of your family's puzzle then, because you need to save all your memories of your parents and your grandparents. Like, you are the storyteller. So you really need to start, working on, everything you can remember about their story, so that your kids, your grandkids, or maybe you don't have kids, but you have nieces and nephews, will get to know more about yourself and your loved ones that they may not have ever met. One of the things that I like to say to people when they're in that situation is that my great uncle Randy, I could tell you his hair color, I could tell you his height, I could tell you what his personality was about, I could tell you where he served in the war, I could tell you what his job was, I could tell you a ton of stuff, right down to him being partially blind in one eye because of something that happened when he was being born. I never met the man in my life. Never met him. He died in 80. I was born in 81. But I grew up feeling like I knew him. I'll look at pictures and miss him. It's really a really weird thing, but my family has always talked of him like he's alive. So for me, he is alive. So yeah, it's funny because the ghost hunting world and the genealogy world definitely can kind of cross over to some degree, because I think in both cases people are looking to keep the dead alive in their own way.
Well, and I was going to ask you, there's the ghost hunting and that sort of thing. What's, in your personal opinion, Kris, what is your sort of definition in one sentence or less of ghost, and what is your definition of the soul?
Ghost. God, I honestly, I don't know. I've had a lot of people ask me what I think a ghost is, and I still have no idea. I'm not 100% settled on the fact that it's people that have passed. It could be. But I'm also the person that relies on records and proof. So for me, there's also a huge part kind of like, well, maybe this is a completely normal and natural occurrence, these things we're experiencing, that could be explained later with better technology. At one point, we thought the world was flat. Now we know better. Mm-hmm. Maybe this is another thing where we just need the right technology to figure it out. We're just not there yet. The soul, I don't know, because then the not-so-skeptical side of me has had strange experiences.
That's what I was going to ask.
And I just would like to think that we don't end. I don't think anybody likes the idea of being put on the planet and working your whole life and making certain connections with people and then just no longer existing. So Not really sure. I'm still kind of stumped on both ends.
Well, I was going to ask you, how many times have you been doing the genealogy and you feel like sometimes the souls of certain ancestors you're working with are kind of opening doors and windows and pointing you in a direction you would have never thought to go? How many times have you had that inner inspiration or that intuition?
I have had some really weird things like that happen, actually.
Good.
There was one time, this one doesn't seem that big of a deal, but there was one time I was looking for my Italian family. I hadn't looked at them for years, but for some reason, some little word on the page stood out to me, and I was like, my grandpa Cantelli. And I started looking him up, and then I had to leave to run down to some shops. And this guy comes up to me, he's like, "Are you Italian?" I was like, "No." I'm like, "Well, my great-grandfather was." And we got into this whole conversation. And this man was from Italy, and he just started a conversation with me about Italy out of nowhere after researching my Italian great-grandfather, who I hadn't thought about in a long time. Then I was at another time I was looking up another ancestor. I went to I was trying to find his headstone at the cemetery. The cemetery was huge, so I started at one end on the front half. My ex started on the opposite end on the front half. And we figured we'd meet in the middle, and if they weren't in the front half of the cemetery, we'd start in the back. So I'm going from stone to stone to stone, and then all of a sudden I hear what sounds like, feet, like footsteps in the grass, like someone's dragging their feet. So I'd start talking, figuring my ex was going to be behind me, and he wasn't. He was still all the way on the other end of the field. And this happened, like 4 or 5 times. So by the time I met up with him, and we hadn't found the headstone, I was a bit confused. And I remember us going down to go to the second half, and the cemetery had been cut in half by this little dirt road. So I stopped just before the dirt road. My ex crossed it and started walking up to the back right portion of it. And I heard clear as day footsteps walk from around the back of me to the front and then down to the left. And I yelled up to my ex, I was like, "They're not up there." I followed where I heard the footsteps go, and there they were. There was a headstone that I was looking for the whole time. And when we got back to the car, my ex said to me, he's like, "You're going to think that I'm crazy." But, and he had the same experience with the footsteps. And the weirdest thing about all that is I had the worst time looking this guy up. His name was James P. Osgood. I ended up doing a video for Ancestry.com, and I just happened to use his headstone. There was no other information in this video about him other than his headstone. And I had a cousin in Utah reach out to me, and he's like, "Hey, cousin," he's like, "saw your video on Ancestry. We're related." He's like, "This guy's name used to be Robert Robbins, but he changed his name. He was married to one woman, and he had, I think it was like 2 boys or 1 boy. I don't know. He had kids with her. He met this other woman, Mary Belinda Luce, who was married with kids as well. Mary and James took their children, left their spouses, went up to Canada, and had my 3rd great-grandmother under the name Osgood. Wow. And then they moved back down to the States. So it was just, the whole thing was weird. It was really weird.
I'll say.
You know what else is weird is when you're telling this story, I can feel him sitting in the back seat of the car after you guys got, and then he sort of evaporated a little bit later.
It's wild though, because like if you think about it, like this guy died in the 1800s. When was the last time somebody went to his grave? And every time I visit an ancestor's grave, I always bring flowers. I don't care how long they've been there.
Oh, that's nice.
I'm going to see them. I'm getting information from their headstones. I leave them flowers. And I remember leaving that place with the whole footsteps thing, thinking, when was the last time this man's grave was visited? And here I am, 3rd
That's pretty awesome.
great-granddaughter showing up randomly. So who knows? I have no idea.
I love
This thing's
stuff like
weird.
that.
But that's actually that's very respectful though to do that, and where most people wouldn't. That's a great thought to think about. How
Your
many
mama
people
raised
don't
you
visit,
right, Kris.
A lot of these graves. Well, what I find fascinating with your stories is, what you and Eddie and I have in common. We're all Caucasian. I don't know if you have a lot of Native American in your background, but like Ana Garcia, you are from Spain, correct?
Yes. So for me, it's been challenging. I am that person after my mom passed away because my dad died when I was much younger. I realized I had really limited information, and because we're immigrants, there's even less information. So what I did was it Memorial Day? No, it was Veterans Day. Ancestry.com had a free come on all weekend and check your background for free, especially if you think that a relative was a veteran. And my grandfather was. He was in World War I. So I managed to find his draft registration card. I found that he had been injured and when he had to actually be taken off the field and where he recuperated, what his injuries were. Then I found some cruise passenger manifests that had him visiting the United States, like whether he was coming from Cuba to New York or Cuba to Palm Beach. So it was interesting to find his name on these different manifests, but that's kind of as far as I've taken it. And then what I did was I went to 23andMe and then just did that, the test, the DNA genealogy, the DNA test, which, provided me with some information, but not that much. So I'm a little bit stumped. I'm not sure where to go to next. And that's only one side of my family, and the rest of my family then would be in Spain. So I don't think I'm really going to find that information through Ancestry.
You need to go do the TV show, Who Do You Think You Are?
Yes, I do. I do.
Well, Kris, what would when somebody calls and says this that Anna's going through, what do you suggest?
It's tough. Honestly, it's tough. Like most of my experiences in the U.S., the little experience that I've had outside of the U.S. has been trying to trace my Italian side, and I'm in the same boat as you. It's tough when it's not an English-speaking country because then you're dealing with, there's a lot of places in Europe, they speak more than one language. It's not like here where, we're kind of limited, but it's tough because you have to kind of find your way around the country online or through, I did, online through emails, that sort of thing, but I used to do it by mail. Just trying to track down my family in a specific town, and I would reach out to everybody in that town. I would send letters to everyone in that town that still had that last name. So
that's kind of tough when your last name is Garcia.
Well, yeah, Garcia, all day.
Smith, Davis.
With mine, it was Cotilli. So I went. I looked up all the Cotillis online in San Donato and just in that area. And then let's say I had 20 of them. So I wrote out one general letter, and I printed it out that many times, and I sent them all out, and I waited, and I started getting a couple letters back, but it's in Italian or it's in broken English. So I'm just like, oh my God, no, I need a translator. And it was tough. And you'll find that a lot of people that are genealogists tend to specialize in certain areas. Like there's people that will specialize, strictly on Ireland. Maybe most of their family goes back to there, so they know a lot of the tricks with researching there. With me, I'm just starting to learn the Italian stuff, so it's difficult. I know Ancestry does do some overseas collections, but it's another thing where you have to pay an extra amount for a world class or I think what they call it, a World Explorer membership.
Do you believe in taking whatever you can, let's say in your genealogy search, and then trying to match that with DNA? Do you think that that's really like the next forefront of trying to take those two and marrying them?
Yeah, I did do the Ancestry DNA test, and I liked it, but then there's the part of me that's super...
skeptical.
Yes, very skeptical.
Really? I'm curious about that. And why is, and I'm curious about that because, you know, someone gave me the 23andMe kit as a gift, so I used it, and now I'm wondering, well, should I do the one for Ancestry? Will that maybe open another door for me? And what is it that you're skeptical about, or where is it that you think it falls short?
Good question.
Okay, so I think in some ways it could be helpful because the thing that I do like about Ancestry DNA is they give you results. So they break down, you know, your nationalities in percentages. Then if you have any DNA matches on their site that have also taken the DNA test, they'll show you all your matches, like all the people you most likely connect with. You share a common ancestor somewhere. If you have your tree uploaded and they have their tree uploaded, the program will tell you specifically which ancestor connects the two of you. So there's that, and I know there's some updates with it as well where they'll, I forget, I'd have to look at it again. But I think that's the feature that I like the most. It lets you know who else you connect with, and then you got to kind of work together to figure out what branch you might connect on. So it's a wild way to go about it. I mean, it's still kind of new, and I think that's where I was skeptical at first. When I first did it, I got my first round of results through Ancestry. And then I'd say maybe a year and a half later, they updated it. So then my results changed drastically. They changed a lot, and I couldn't wrap my head around why they did.
Oh, that's fascinating. See, now I understand what you're saying. Yeah. I'm getting that now.
Yeah. So they explained it that, like, let's say at first they had, 10,000 people took it, and they had that limited amount of 10,000 people that they're comparing samples with. But then let's say a year later they've got 30,000. Their pool has expanded, so now they're able to break down or pinpoint more accurately your nationalities. So it changed enough that I was like, whoa, wait a minute, how does this work? But I guess the further they go in, the more people they have to work with, the more accurate the test will, the more they'll be able to pinpoint specific locations your family goes back to. But yeah, I had a hard time with it after the first change. But I do like the common ancestor thing, them showing you who your matches are. So let's say you match with somebody and you both had Spain in common as a destination your family goes back to or connects to through DNA. You'd be able to chat with them and hopefully figure out maybe they have more information that you don't that would answer your questions. Or you have another person to try to break the wall with.
Well, I know when I took the DNA testing, I have it active on my account because I keep a constant account with Ancestry.com. It says right now I have 149 fourth cousins or closer. So, and it's growing all the time is, the more people that take it. The one that a new feature, I'm not quite for sure, and I called and asked him about it, and I still don't understand it, is the new Ancestry Discoveries, the beta.
Yes.
I don't understand that.
That's the one I don't get too.
Yeah, because these people, their names, and Eddie and Anna can see it on the screen there, but these names are not even in my lineage at all. So, but it's showing matches. So I don't understand what that means. And so
I mean, maybe it means that there's something in your DNA that matches with known, like, DNA samples that they have from, like, specific people. I have no idea.
Yeah, and
I don't know how that works.
Well, some of these, like one was the James William Huntsman and Anna Davis, and they are in the area of where the Sweets and the Slavens. My third great-grandfather, Henderson Sweet, married a Rebecca Slavin back in Campbell County in 1830-something. And so those two are in that area. Well, all I know is and I'm going to get to the blocks. There's blocks that people get to. But Henderson Sweet, he was born in 1816, my third great-grandfather, so I don't know anything before that. I don't. Yeah. I can't find. I've found every other lineage back to 1500s and 1400s, but this one I can't find. But it's from that same area, and I'm wondering if that is part of that family. And it's not the Slavin, because I know the Slavins. The Slavins family go back, so it has to be part of the Sweet side.
Maybe they moved to the west.
Well, the Sweets did later, but
Oh.
in the late 1800s. But okay, this I know the time's going way fast, and I hate to waste this time but blocks, like Anna has the block of being from another country, but two different countries. But for like myself, the Sweets in 1816, Henderson Sweet, born in Kentucky. It shows in the 1880 census. In 1880 census is when a census that actually showed the states where their parents came from. Before that, it was there. It showed that it was the father was from Virginia and the mother was from Tennessee. So that's it. That's all I can find. I've called Wayne County, Kentucky, where he was born. He died in 1883 in Mumfordsville, Kentucky. In Mumfordsville, the courthouse burnt down, and so all those records are gone. And so when somebody gets stumped like that in its records here in the United States, how does one go about that? Do they now just have to wait till DNA testing comes around, or is this something that what would you suggest for somebody that's been working for 20 years on trying to find past my third great grandfather?
Third great grandfather. So you're trying to find the names of your third great grandparents.
I know
grandfather's parents.
Yes, his parents. Yes.
All right. So names could show up on marriage certificates. So maybe find marriage certificate for your third great grandfather.
I found their marriage certificate. I found his marriage certificate.
Okay.
I even found where he was. I even found a Henderson Sweet that was a Confederate in the Civil War. And he signed up in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is not too far from Scotts County, Tennessee. So I'm finding information, but the only thing that I can think of in 1830, 1820. So he was born in 1816. So he was either 4 or 14. I can't remember. It was 1820, 1830. There was in the census a Mrs. Catherine Sweet. There was hardly any Sweets in that area, so I'm assuming that it has to be his mother. I'm assuming. I'm not saying it's true.
Yeah, I mean, have you gotten his death certificate?
See, that's the thing. It got burnt.
Oh, it got burnt. Okay, so do you know the names of his siblings? Because sometimes you can trace the siblings.
I don't know any siblings at all.
Okay.
There was a John Sweet, which John and Henderson seem to be passed down. So there was a John Sweet in the same census as 1820, but I couldn't find any John Sweet thereafter. And they were two different. It was a Mrs. Catherine Sweet and a John Sweet, so they were at different residents, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Oh,
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to come down to cross-referencing all the documents you can find. Trying to think if there's something else that you can do.
Yeah, I've thought, maybe the DNA testing will, eventually like a Sweet family DNA test, because there's a lot of Sweets that came from New York, and I'm assuming it's English. And it showed his father was from Virginia. But it's frustrating.
What records do you have on him?
What
great grandfather? What records do you have?
I have the census from. Well, this is what's fascinating. He was born in 1816, and there's no records from the 1840, 1850, or 1860. There was no record of him being in a census of that time. He showed up again in 1870 and 1880. I couldn't find him in the 1860, 1850, or 1814 or 1840 census.
Yeah, I know when you go far enough back, the only thing you're going to get is the head of household. So
right. And
that's a challenge.
1850, he was already what, in 1850 from 30 some years old. So he should have been in 1850 at least. Yeah. And he was married, or he already had kids in 1851, and they were married in 1837 to Rebecca Slavin.
Unless he was living with parents for some reason, him and his wife.
Maybe.
I mean, it depends. because then his father would still be the head of household.
Right, and they were married. He was married in Wayne County, Kentucky. Right across the state line was the Scotts County, Tennessee. So they were just right across the county line and state line, and that's where the Slavins were. And there's huge Sweet and Slavin in that area. It's just it's been like that's been my roadblock. All these other sides that I've pretty much found and later on, but that's the tough one.
And Kris, this is a weird question, and it could be indirectly tied into what Tony's asking about. What happens if someone goes into a mental institution or a sanitarium for some reason, for some length of time, for tuberculosis or something like that, and is lucky enough to come out? Would the records show up there, like they disappeared for a while and we find out they're in a mental institution and or a sanitarium to recover from something like tuberculosis?
Yeah. It's actually funny you said that, because the big problem I have in my tree right now is my second great-grandmother. She was born in 1865. She was only 34 when she died, so my age. She had 3 kids, and she died of TB.
Yeah.
So I don't know if she died in any sort of institution or hospital, but then the other thing is I went through to kind of clean my family tree up, and I created quite this mess for myself, because I ended up taking another look at a document that showed her as being adopted. So now I don't even know who her blood relatives are. So an entire branch that I had that went from her back to Scotland was just completely chopped off at her, and I can't find the name of her parents. It's not even in the genealogy books in Maine. Instead of some daughter of so and so, it says wife of Melville Williams, wife of, mother of. I can't seem to figure that one out. So it's hard to say with hospitals. I mean, I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head, just because I haven't dealt with that yet, and I actually am going to have to with her to find out if I'm assuming she didn't die at home, because if she did, there would guess the rest of the family would have gotten it, I would think.
Because back in that day, they just brought them home and put them up in the living room for 3 days and then buried them, right?
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing is with all the hospitals I have investigated in the past, there's been a few where the records are there, and they're all over the ground, they're all over everywhere. And I remember with Amy, we're in one, I can't remember where the heck it was, but we're in one climbing over all these records, and some of them have photos with the records.
Wow.
And it was just all of their complete details, and the genealogist in me was like wanting to scream, because I was like, oh my God, are these backed up anywhere? Is this just it? And, rain's coming in through the ceiling, things are all soggy and nasty. It was just, I couldn't believe it was all just sitting there going to.
Yeah, and how is that legal? You know what I mean?
I don't know.
I mean, that just sounds crazy. I think I know the answer to this question, but I am curious. Who has the best records through history? Would it be the African Americans who were the slaves, or would it be the Native Americans?
Honestly, I haven't dealt with either in my own tree, so
the reason I think
I'm not sure.
I think it would be the slaves, because they were, and it's so sad to say, they were property.
Yeah.
And so they had to claim that
as
property. So the African Americans have better records, I would guess, and I could be wrong, than the Native Americans.
Right. It's a different way of collecting information.
Yeah.
Right.
And it has to show up somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I can't believe the time is flying. And
can I ask one more question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
of course.
You're a very pretty girl, okay?
you sure a pretty girl.
You're a pretty girl. So let me ask you something. So you meet somebody and he's all cute and stuff, or you might like girls, I don't know. And so you meet some strapping, hot cutie pie, and he's like all into you, and he wants you in his music video, and he's crunching on you and all that stuff. How do you take them on a coffee date and you say, look, bitch, here's how it is. And you just lay it out for him right there. And then if he's into it after you tell him about your wonderful past with genealogy and your ghost hunting, what do guys do when you tell them that? I'm just curious.
Oh God, I got two examples on this one. All right, so I'm going to share a story with you guys that I don't think I've shared anywhere else.
Oh,
Whoa,
exclusive.
thank you.
Breaking news.
Here we go. All right, so when I was on Ghost Hunters, it was impossible to meet anybody. You know, it's like some of the guys that I was dating, they were dating Kris Williams from Ghost Hunters. And then once they kind of got to know me and they kind of got to know that my life really wasn't all that glamorous and, you know, I wasn't around too much, they kind of were over it and they'd kind of just move on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just hard to really connect with anybody because I was never home. So a friend of mine that I worked with, he's like, you should try a match. I was just like, I don't know if that's a good idea, this whole website dating thing. He's like, yeah, why not go on, do a profile, don't talk about work, say you don't want to talk about work and all this stuff. And I was like, all right, you know, what the heck? What do I get to lose at this point? So there was this guy from Boston. Him and I were, you know, going back and forth, conversation, you know, just silly, joking around about sports or whatever. And I was like, yeah, he's all right, not really my type. The thing is, I've been dating the wrong type, so what the heck, right? So we decided we'd meet for a drink at this place that had a bar, but it was also a restaurant. And we figured, we're like, okay, well, if conversation goes all right, we'll go and get dinner. If not, like, neither side will be offended, and we'll call it a day. So we have our drinks. Yeah, it's going good. Nice guy. Good conversation the whole time. So we go to have dinner. And at some point, he says to me, he's like, oh, yeah, I love scary movies. I love horror movies. And we start talking movies. And then he goes, well, what do you watch for TV? Because I watch this show, that show, Ghost Hunters, and he just keeps going. And I'm looking at him like, okay, I didn't say anything online about what I do for work. Two, at the time I hadn't been on long enough that I was able to put up some pictures that weren't anywhere online. And I'm like, is he messing with me right now? Like, I honestly couldn't tell. So he's waiting for a response. I was like, well, I'm not on the road shooting Ghost Hunters. I watched this show, that show, and another show. His jaw dropped, like, in the table. His face turned purple. He started to hyperventilate for, like, a split second. And then he's like, oh, my God, Taylor, Kris Williams. Oh, my God, you're in my top 5. I tell all my friends you're in my top 5. I'm thinking, I better be number 1, first of all. Second of all.
Oh, that is funny.
I'm like, I want to die right now. As soon as that happened, I was like, okay, date over.
Oh, my.
It's done. But the guy that I've been with now for almost 4 years, he lives in Australia. He told me he was a pilot. I wasn't impressed at all. I was like, oh, God, a pilot is the last thing I need. And then he looked at me like, oh, God, crazy TV bimbo that looks for dead things. Like, you know, I'm all set. And now here it is, 4 years later, and we've been going back and forth, you know, visiting each other. So I don't know. I just like
sweet.
people that don't make a big deal out of things. Because at
Absolutely.
the end of the day, it's a job.
I know. Isn't that the funniest thing? I don't know why, but people think, well, Janet Jackson has a great song. All of her songs are great. She has this one great song, and I think it's Demita Joe. She's like, when you see me, do you see the girl that you see on TV? Do you see the girl that you see at the movies? Or are you actually seeing the true me? And for some reason, when we do this kind of work, people think that our life is so glamorous and stuff, and we're out like leaf blowing our lawn and picking our nose in the backyard and looking for dead people. So it's totally different, don't y'all find?
Well, what I would be interested in is, could we get Kris to work with you, Eddie? And like, how do you take like a ghost hunter with a medium who talks to? Well, are they ghosts? Is that, I mean, what you consider ghosts?
What I see, that's why I love the question we had earlier with Kris, and that is, my favorite thing to tune into, and the easiest thing to tune into, is the soul, the human soul, because that's what I call high, fast, and pure frequency. And like Kris's soul just shines through. Y'all's soul shines through. A ghost is a dense, wobbly, staticky AM frequency. Everybody I'm talking to right now is this high Wi-Fi frequency. And so I can go in and communicate with your soul, and your soul can talk back to me in the Wi-Fi world. But the AM staticky, dense ghost energy is a little harder to do.
Because I know there's a point you asked me about dating and all of that, and I am bringing this full circle, because then I wonder, when you think that way and when you work that way, and the work that Kris does that is different, I wonder if the only way it can work when you are dating is to find someone who, even if they are as normal as all get out, there is a level to which they operate where you do. Does that make any sense?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. What do you think, Kris?
Where they operate?
Yeah, they operate either emotionally, mentally, the way that you do. Because look, you could. It's easy. You make the great joke. It's like, look, I look for dead people, and I'm looking for objects, and is the house haunted? And I get it. Listen, it's a job, but clearly you do that because there's something about you. There's an extra sense, or there's a sense that's heightened in you.
Yes.
So I wonder, when you pair up with someone, and I know this is, aside from, the work that might scare off some guys, but I wonder if the only way you can be paired is to be paired with someone who also has a heightened sense in a different manner,
and a passion, and electricity, a purpose,
like
sense
your
of
pilot,
purpose.
right? Like where is it you two connect?
In the heart chakra.
We're both, I think, pretty rational, kind of straightforward, skeptical, fact-based people. But at the same time, he's also got the sensitive part of him. His mom's a sweetheart. I love her to pieces, and he's always telling me I remind him too much of his mom, and not in a bad way. But she has her feeling about things. Like, and, she kind of feels that sometimes people are just kind of around, like her mom's just around.
That's right.
That's kind of how he grew up with her, believing that, and I think he believes that or feels that to some degree. And then there's me, who kind of believes that and wants to believe that and feels it to some degree. So the two of us can kind of relate on that. But being what he does for work, being a pilot, everything is just, making sure everything's dead on, making sure things are right, and it's straightforward, fact-based stuff. So we're kind of the same in a lot of ways, I think, with that stuff. But I guess that's how we connect. And we really don't get impressed very easily with jobs. It's like if somebody walked up to me and said, "Hey, I'm the president," I'd be like, "Yeah, that's nice." But I have a lot of respect for your job and your position, and the fact that you would have done a lot of work to get to that place. So I'm not going to treat you any differently than I would somebody else.
That's right.
Awesome. So I think we just have a lot in common that way.
Wow, I love that answer.
Right.
Thank you,
And we
Kris.
love Kris, and thank you, Kris. You are amazing, and thank you for coming and talking to us. Because I know
you guys are amazing, because you've put up with me now for the second time.
I know. Well, the invitation now for number 3.
That's right.
Number 3. For anybody out there that wants to know more information about Ancestry, you can follow Kris at, is it Kris Williams 1?
Kris Williams 81 on Twitter, and then I have a genealogy website, www.keytoyourtree.com, and I do a lot of the blogs that people would have seen on Ancestry going up there, but I'm also adding new ones as well, and kind of sharing things as I'm learning them too, because everybody specializes in one area because they're following their family.
Right.
So it's good to share when you learn new things, because hopefully you'll help somebody else break through a dead wall, roadblock. Yeah.
Well, hopefully they'll ask you some more questions, and you can listen to this if you just tuned in or tuned in halfway. You can watch this on YouTube. It's going to be up later, and then you can listen to it on iTunes, Stitcher, and on our host page. So, Kris Williams, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kris.
Thank you, guys.
We'll come back soon.
Will do. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. All right. Well, it's time for us to take a quick break, and we're going to go completely different direction. The next hour, we're going to talk about UFOs. So, you ready for that, Eddie and Anna?
I'm strapping in right now.
All right. All right. Don't go anywhere. Truth be told with Tony and Anna and Eddie. Be right back.